morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 64 of the Blowback Roundtable. We have a full panel today. I will introduce everyone, starting with Ben Toth from Pécs, Hungary. We've got Carlo Parcelli in Washington, D.C. We have John Steppling coming live from Norway. And Ian Kummer is our special guest from a suburb in Moscow. I've been corrected, but the corrected was corrected. So I guess there's many ways to say that city, but it's a great city. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Okay, so our title is Mobilize More Meat. To me, that's kind of a throwback to the Lindsey Graham visit over to Ukraine, where he was really advocating that the Ukrainians offer up more meat and lower their mobilization age from 27 to 25. So what a great American that Lindsey Graham is. He's a real gem. But we can let's just open it up. Before the show, we were already getting angry at a few things.
Do you want to continue for a second on this theme? Because the first one was Lindsey Graham, who apparently there was a follow-up article. He got into hot shit by Ukrainians. They were very upset with him saying this. And then there was this article in the Telegraph by Edward Lutwak, who said, the recruitment age, mobilization age should be 18. And now the US played whack-a-mole, basically sending three people around the globe. One was point man of Biden, Mr. Sullivan, who went to Kiev unannounced. Then there was Lord Raytheon, Austin, who went to the German, the Rammstein format, the big base where all the defense ministers meet on the Ukraine format. I think they both went completely empty-handed. And the third one was, Admiral Rob Bauer, Dutchman, who also went to Kiev to this defense forum, and he said this, came empty-handed and said the same. You might need some grenades, but that's not it. You also need people, So that's what you're going to need. We're talking mobilization, just sending out these people and saying the same thing with nothing to show. Not the 60 billion, no ATACMS, no good news, nothing we can send you, but you need to mobilize. Is where the title and the alternate title of Whack-a-Mole came from.
And in that same, thought process, Shoigu said this year alone, 70,000 deaths, right? Is it deaths?
Brutal numbers. These are confirmed deaths. And, Russia does that when you can see 100 people there and then there's a Kinjal strike, then it's 100. But it doesn't count the behind the lines. It doesn't count that you can't collect, that is not confirmed. It's just brutal numbers that Shoigu gave.
I saw that headline. I didn't actually read the text. Is he talking about the past 12 months, or is he just talking about
since January?
Past 2.5 months.
So it's 2024. Okay, so
this is all 2024.
So that's the problem. They're running out of meat, and that's a big problem from the U.S. perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there's 11,000 plus armor. They're hunting for the glitzy Western stuff, the Patriots, the HIMARS, the Bradleys. It's just hunting season. And then what Ukraine did was strike deep into Russia to hit the refineries. Suddenly the oil price went up, which I'd been looking for. And just this morning, I opened up the Financial Times and it says the US recommends don't do this because it's affecting the crude price, and also there might be retaliation. And just like that, overnight, there was retaliation. Multiple cities went dark in Ukraine. That's beginning in the war zone. Go ahead, John.
But no, I'm just curious, apropos of this, when we were looking at the now kind of viral photoshopped image of Macron at the punching bag. What does one make of this? Why is Macron talking about sending 20,000 French troops to Ukraine? The French people are overwhelmingly against this idea. So what's going on? This begs a number of other questions, of course, related questions. Is he really going to send 20,000 troops?
Nonsense. My take.
I kind of doubt it. My first reaction was he's never going to do that. France would not be happy with 5,000-10,000 deaths of French troops fighting for Ukraine and the United States. But this, the only other observation, then I want to hear what people think. I continue to be kind of amazed, maybe I shouldn't be, at the level of and the effectiveness of anti-Russian propaganda that all you hear in the West, you hear it from Hollywood shows, you hear it in news, in op-ed pieces, you hear it in social media, how evil Russia is. They want to take over the world. They're about to invade Spain and Uganda at the same time, and maybe Australia.
All the way to Lisbon is what I read recently.
We know that the West has had this accelerated Russophobic set of propaganda campaigns, and they seem to have been at least relatively effective. I'm just sort of throwing that out there because I continue to be surprised that, it seems not that long ago to me anyway that Russia was not viewed as there was a small window of when Russia was not the enemy. What did Russia do to become the enemy again? I'm really kind of curious. What do people think Russia did? Because I'm not doing anything.
I have my take, but I thought maybe the Moscow correspondent would be the best to answer first. What do you guys think?
Well, there's several different points we just kind of went over. So I would say, it's possible you might see more European troops in Ukraine, because the problem is I think Macron might be all hot air, but the problem is when you say something like that, it looks really bad if you don't.
We have a short answer from Spanish fans.
Yes. And if you did put French or German apparently not German, but if you put some foreign troops in Ukraine, what that could do, there'd be two purposes for that. One, it would of course free up more Ukrainians to go to the meat wave. And there would be casualties, but if you have these rear echelon foreign units in Kyiv and in Lvov, it would be hard to hit them in large numbers because unless they all put a target on their backs and pile up in one place, which they're not going to do. They're going to disperse, and it's going to be hard to hit them. So, it would, I think, be a meaningful step to free up more Ukrainians. Like, hey, why are you on rear duty? You can go to the front with you. And also, it would be a trigger. It would be you could take it. You could interpret it however we want. It could be a bluff, or it could be a real step. It's also a trigger force because if Russia does open up a new front, like through Belarus, for example, and there's French troops sitting there, but then you're attacking French troops, and that initiates the question of, you have Russians and French directly fighting each other. What does that mean? So I think I would say it's kind of unlikely that Macron's going to follow through, but I wouldn't dismiss it either, especially since
on that point, there was this, I think he was introduced to the military historian, but a post like a former French, I don't know what his rank was, but military guy on television who showed these 20,000 in two formations. Maybe you've seen that. One is at the north, separating Belarus, and one is at the line of the Dnieper. And both of them, he said, basically, as he said, it's a tripwire force. You dare attack us, what will happen? I want to show you guys the guy that gets my Poetry of the Year award, the Medvedev and Old Man Luka award all in one. This is, I think, the great-grandson of Leo Tolstoy, and he's called Pyotr Tolstoy. He's a Speaker of the House Duma, and this was his perfect French conversation on French television. It's gone viral since. Oh, you're giving me the loading spin now? Come on. Sorry.
De son opinion. Vous vous foutez de ce que
Sorry,
dit Emmanuel
subtitle.
Macron. Exactement. Et quand il vous dit qu'il est prêt, éventuellement, à ne pas se fixer de limite On s'en fout de ses limites. On s'en fout de Macron, de ce qu'il dit Macron. On s'en fout de limites de Macron. Et on va tuer...
La France reste une puissance.
France is a number one nuclear power, you know, have that in mind.
Tout à fait, avec 200 missiles.
Absolutely, with 200 missiles. So here's what we will do.
Et donc, on va tuer tous les soldats français qui vont venir au sol ukrainien. Tous. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, il y en a, durant le conflit en Ukraine, 13 000 mercenaires, dont 367 Français et dont 147 ont déjà tué. Donc, il y en a 147 citoyens de la France qui ont été tués en Ukraine. Et on va tuer tout le monde. Vous inquiétez pas.
Don't worry. That was George Tolstoy, my new hero.
But to ask the question also of what, what John pointed out, when did Russia become an adversary? I would say I wrote about this, I'd say about a week ago. It's like every nation state is like, it's like the movie, it's like in those Saw movies, it's like a torture puzzle. It's like every nation state is subjected to this, that you have to deliberately hurt yourself. So like in Saw, you have to deliberately hurt yourself to get out of the trap. If you don't hurt yourself, it kills you. So that's the premise. I think that's the case with these nation states. And you can see case in point, Armenia. They have to do these deliberately harmful. Of course, the Western press is very, very good to Armenia, praises them, and it's Russia that's letting down Armenia. It's Russia's fault that Armenians have, even though they're entirely self-inflicted problems. But if you are a middle class or upper middle class person in Armenia with this, the carrots that you're being offered is, being able to immigrate to Western Europe or to even as Armenia is getting squeezed in the next few years, we just won't have an Armenia anymore. But if you're someone who can escape Armenia and go to a Western country, it's okay. That door opened for you. So in Russia's case, they were subjected to this, and you have these tenuous territories like Crimea. So Russia was supposed to just give those up, deliberately harm itself, and that would ingratiate itself to, Western oligarchs. And then, but that was a red line Putin could not cross. Putin's a liberal. Putin wanted good relationships with the West, but that would have been political suicide to lose Crimea in 2014. Just give it away to a pro-NATO state. It wasn't going to happen. So he had to make that deal with his own nationalists. It's like with his own right-wing guys, with his own, basically everybody. We've just been outrageous to give away Crimea like that.
Including the communists.
Yes. It would have just been bad for everybody. So Putin was forced to act. Regardless of how he personally felt. He had to act on that. And that was a failed test. That made Russia an enemy right there.
I don't think France is going to send any troops unless it's part of a strategy, with all of the Western countries, right? And it might be some kind of a backroom deal where, okay, we're gonna escalate this way. First, France is gonna send their troops, and then we're gonna let some of them die. There might be some kind of a plan or strategy that involves France moving. I don't think Macron would do that just on his own. So I think if it happens, we know it's part of a prepared strategy as opposed to just some kind of crazy Macron idea that he came up with all by himself. Like when Ian was saying about, national suicide, I think the job of national governments from the Western imperialist perspective is to subordinate the interests of their population to the interests of Western capital. And I think that when they fail to do that, they become targets of regime change. It's really that simple. And I think when Russia, helped Syria survive, because Syria was one of those countries that wasn't subordinating their people or their resources to the interests of Western capital. And Russia joined that team when they went and helped prop up Syria. So now Russia's guilty of the same offense that Syria was, and that all these resistance anti-imperialist countries are. It's essentially they refuse to subordinate the interests, their national interests, the interests of their people, to the interests of Western capital. But I mean, I'm not telling John anything he doesn't know.
Of course not.
I mean, like
I think
Syria.
the short period that John referred to when Russia was our friend was pretty much from 1990 to 2000, the first election of Vladimir Putin, because they thought he was another Yeltsin, you know, and then he started to put the place back in order again. If you look
George
at every
Bush
metric,
looked into his eyes and knew he was a good man.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I remember that one.
With the bromance with Scrub, and they made a big. What's interesting is that the Western media made a big point of that Bush Putin friendship that was really short, you know, short-lived, but there was a lot of press about it, and it was just interesting that it so quickly changed, and that was so quickly forgotten. Of course, 9/11 happened, and that became this other. They needed to incorporate different plot points into that narrative. But what's interesting to me anyway, and I think you're right about Syria, because the U.S., all the neocons, all the think tank people had put out endless papers about how evil Assad was, and a lot of the left, the far left, the World Socialist webpage, all the Trotskyists and whatnot, were heavily invested in getting rid of Assad too, because they thought there was, you know, an imminent revolution or something against Assad. So it was that was one of those litmus tests, like the bombing of the former Yugoslavia, like Rwanda, and now Gaza, in a sense, where you can, you know, you can gauge how people react and sort of peg their politics based on that. But I'm kind of circling the point here. What amazes me, though, is the rhetoric coming out of Europe now, because you hear the defense minister in Spain said, we have to be prepared for a Russian invasion just in case, because everyone knows Putin's got his eyes on Barcelona, you know. And what? Finland, the rhetoric coming out of Finland is completely belligerent. The rhetoric coming out of Italy, coming out of Slovakia, coming out of Sweden, the two new NATO members.
Slovakia, no. By the way,
Not Slovakia?
I agree. No, that's where Fico is, and he has a sovereign policy, so he's the new bad boy. There's a democratic backslide. Look at the rule of law there. Now he's the enemy, just like Orban.
Yeah, he's the new Orban. I want to back up a little bit, because I'm hearing from commentators that if Macron sends troops into Ukraine and they're attacked, that will trigger Article 5. Is that what it is? And that's not the case, because it would have to be
on your soil.
France directly attacked. So I wanted to clear that up.
Well, it doesn't have to be. I mean, so France could. I mean, anything can provoke. I mean, because France can just request Article 5 if their troops are attacked. So it's a true statement. But the problem is that Article 5 is not binding in any way. You can send. You can send a box of Band-Aids. You can send thoughts and prayers, or you can just do nothing. And even if the treaty was binding, even if there was an alternate universe where Article 5 explicitly said you have to militarily give meaningful military support and declare war on whoever they're fighting.
You can always mold that.
Said that. It does not, because no international treaty can overrule your own domestic legislature. So it's game theory. It's game theory, because
on the broader point. But John, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm just curious about this rhetoric. That's all.
For me, it shocked me back in 2022. I thought this was gone, and it was all under the surface in Germany, in the West. This Russians. It's just like the Cold War, the Red Scare. It all just came bubbling back, and it was shocking. But the whole Macron thing, sending up the bubble, I think it was to rope the US in. Come on, come with me, send troops with me, and then they'll know it's serious because the US is here. And the US said no. You know, Trump is talking about it doesn't matter if it's campaign or not. They've got their pants full of because it looks like he's dropping NATO. And it means, guys, we're all on our own. We've emptied all of our ammunition, all of our weapons. I think there was some small country. Yeah, the Czechs sent their last little attack helicopter, the last one they had to Ukraine. And they've been belligerent to Russia for 2 years. Help is not coming. And they look in the mirror and they see, okay, they're probably going to do the same to us now. I think that's a simple psychological thing. Russia doesn't. Russia said, I'm going to end this horrible hostility towards my people, the Russian speakers in the Donbass, and that's it. But they've gone completely nuts, especially the Baltic states who we've left out. You know, there's that woman who sounds like a salt brand. Kaya Kallas. Yeah. What you said, Ian, reminds me, because this was verbatim in ERR, the Estonian press, that I know I committed political suicide, meaning she increased taxes to get militarized, but I had no choice. And I don't think it was I had no choice because of Russia. It has no choice because NATO and the West, and she wants to be the best puppy there is towards these people. And that's all that there is. All that is, and of course, booting France out of Africa. You know, I think this whole thing, putting out that punching bag thing, should be very afraid. We're still a serious thing, even without the US. It's a whole bluff. I mean, Ian, you're the guy who knows military logistics. Just how far away is the Dnieper River or the northern, border of Ukraine to field a force from France and keep up all the logistics supplies, all the food, all the ammo? I see it as completely, impossible. They come in, airstrike, there you go. I don't know what they do next. They can bluff about the nukes, but no one believes them, as you've seen, Pyotr Tolstoy, 200 missiles. We have 6,000.
Well, the logistics, what's keeping the logistics afloat are just the organic Ukrainian forces and plus whoever mercenaries, CIA guys, or whoever they have there now, is that Russia doesn't strike anything outside the territory of Ukraine. So as long as that glove stays on, conceptually, there's no difference between supplying a French soldier and a Ukrainian soldier. It might even be easier to support French soldiers because you're not having Ukrainians' sticky fingers pilfering supplies that are sent. It'd be nice if 100% of the supplies meant for French soldiers reached French soldiers. Maybe it would be easier, but you're right though. If there's a missile strike on French soldiers, okay, what is France going to do about it besides push the red button? That's a good question. They really can't do anything besides push the red button or just eat the embarrassment.
Well, but again, the French public is overwhelmingly against this idea. So this is partly why I think Macron's not going to send anybody. His existence is precarious enough. But it's worth noting that as Victoria Nuland steps down and her, posse is replaced with Blinken's and Jake Sullivan's people more, the pivot is toward China. Hollywood is always a fascinating barometer for things. And
what did you watch recently?
Well, no, it's just there's an uptick of anti-China stuff on across the board: news, fiction shows, series, everything, movies. Suddenly, you can feel this shift toward China. The topic of Taiwan comes up. The media is regurgitating all the 2019 Hong Kong stuff, and I feel like the Russia thing has on some level run its course for Washington, and I think we're going to see a renewed focus on China, and if Trump becomes president, that is probably where he will focus his energy too.
What does that mean for Ukraine? You're dropped. You're a hot potato. The EU can have you.
Yeah. Well, what are they going to do? I mean, that war's lost. Russia can decide how they want to end how do they want to resolve the conclusion to this conflict. But Ukraine can't win. Everybody knows they can't win. They don't even know what win means in this context. Nobody seems to. But they're running out of soldiers. They were talking. I've heard several different commentators talk about they're conscripting anybody off the street to fight in Ukraine, and it's just a debacle, and Russia, it's going to the resolution of this whole thing will be on Russian terms, and that's going to be interesting to see what kind of space-saving mechanism will be in place for the U.S. I have no idea, but that's over, and so ratcheting up Taiwan and Hong Kong, but especially Taiwan, seems like the natural next step, and probably what's going to happen.
You mentioned in your summary for this show that they put up a Tiananmen Square memorial somewhere. Where was that?
I think in Brussels. Why not? As Washington does, so does Brussels. It's a colony, and that had to go up this week because we follow. I was wondering if anybody caught, because they've Americanized it, the Three Body Problem, which is a fantastic Chinese sci-fi series, but apparently it just debuted on one of them, Amazon, HBO, I don't know what. Scene 1, episode 1. There's the Red Guard during the Cultural Revolution. And they lynch an old man, a very nice scholar of space, because he believes in the Big Bang Theory. So that kind of sets the mood already for the whole thing.
Yeah, that was about us. I watched that opening scene, and that was one of the. I went, oh, okay, this is being brought back again. Okay, cartoon, Maoist Europe. Yeah.
That's what China is, the repressive, horrifying. They're destroying nature. They're building all kinds of stuff. It's all there on episode 1.
Yeah.
Well, I think even if the USA washes its hands of Ukraine, but I don't think it'll completely wash its hands of Ukraine, because they can drip feed. Just even if that new funding package is just dead on arrival in the House of Representatives, it'll be a hot potato in Europe's lap. I mean, they can feed enough. I mean, Ukraine is not going to collapse tomorrow. I mean, if I wake up tomorrow and it does collapse, I will be the first to admit I was wrong. But I think Europe can keep Ukraine on life support probably for the rest of the year.
That sounds right to me.
I'm okay to go against you, but to me, there was this Politico, the French version had a newsletter. It's called the Playbook, not the school book, whatever, something book. And that featured Macron's aides or something anonymously saying, well, Ukraine could fall very, very quickly, and pretty much talking about a summer collapse. The Russian media picked this up, by the way, because look at Europe. I mean, I have tried to sort of untangle all the harebrained schemes they have, and I failed. There's the Czech initiative that got 300,000 shells, which is nothing really in the grand scheme of things. And they got $1 billion here, $2 billion there. They want to use the profits from the Russian assets, which is $3 billion in a year. But also the G7 wants to use it as collateral to do a $50 billion whatever. And they can't do it. They can't get the banks to actually seize just the profit, not the assets. Meanwhile, Shmihal, the prime minister of Ukraine, saying after he got a couple of billion from Europe, saying our hole in our budget is 37 billion this year. This is not a hole they can fill. They're broke. That's why they're talking about. The EU, the ECB is talking about Eurobonds by central, which goes against the founding documents, by centrally taxing all the nation states and all the businesses there, because that's the way out. That's how we can get 100 billion out of thin air. Even America, as Lindsey Graham said, that we are very much in debt, and every assistance we give to countries is going to become a loan. Something that Ukrainians and Zelensky seemed very unhappy about, by the way. But yeah, all of this cash flow thing is coming to a dribble, and I don't think it's enough to sustain a place like Ukraine, especially, as you said, without men. girls as well. They die just as anybody else nowadays. Even like 18, 19-year-old girls. I've seen some, cemetery footage, horrific.
I just want to introduce one other thought.
Anyway, I'm in the summer collapse camp. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, we have this pivot to China. I think that's my perception. But there's all these other moving parts. The climate discourse continues. The war against farmers in Europe continues.
Yep.
And the Netherlands again is kind of at the forefront of this. So this hasn't stopped. In Norway, there are sort of threats being made about meeting these climate goals and what that would mean for farmers and so forth. Nobody is on board with this, I should add.
Net zero has died. It's slowly dying in Germany. It's dying in the Nordics. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's no shortage though of the World Economic Forum people coming out and saying this has to happen. You have to eat bugs, and Angelina Jolie is sautéing scorpions for her children.
I'm never going to eat the bugs.
No, and Nicole Kidman was eating crickets in a spot that was promoting all of this climate stuff. But my sense is that all of this rhetoric that has been in place for the last 20 years regarding climate is petering out. That people are kind of waking up to the fact that like electric cars are more polluting. They are too heavy for the roads, and it's causing all kinds of infrastructure harm. Nobody knows what to do with the batteries. The cars don't last very long in cold weather countries. That I can testify to. And all of these plans are starting to sound very hollow. And John Kerry is stepping down, and Al Gore is stepping down. All of the faces of the climate emergency. And so I don't know. This is my sense, because all of the predictions, of course, didn't come true. New York's not underwater, and all these ridiculous claims that were made. And so I don't know where that's going. But sort of alongside that is this other issue. And this has been a story here, but it's a story in the US too. The building these big data centers that are in
energy, the grid,
and is enormous, is just off the charts, is insane. And people are now making predictions. Corey Morningstar was sending me some stuff on this, that if this keeps going, the energy demand for these data centers and so forth keeps growing at the rate that it's growing now. All energy is going to be used for this. And you're going to have rationing for all kinds of other things. You're going to have blackouts and,
the grid can't handle it. I've seen it in the US, news headlines, and in Europe as well. Yeah. I think Carlo is going to be the one to respond.
Well, I just wanted to say we discussed that with Christopher Black on a recent program. He had a different take on global climate change. He saw it as being a serious threat. And we talked about Bitcoin and the heat that simply Bitcoin generates. And it's a negativity. We call it unanticipated consequences in technology. But what's the foundation of that, of these unanticipated consequences? It's quantification and mathematization of the sciences, which has accelerated the technology to the point where it's beyond what the planet can sustain. And I think that's what's creating, that's the end game with the climate. It's the scientific method itself. It's Feyerabend, what Feyerabend talked about. It's what is involved in not sitting down and saying, look, with these quantum paradoxes, we don't know what these results of these technologies are going to be. And I think it's a very deep malaise when it comes to technology, a very deep and very nihilistic malaise. When I'm working on a dramatic monologue or for someone, I go, why am I writing this? There's not going to be anybody around in another 50 years.
Yeah.
Why
I don't
bother?
go into the Malthusian or the nihilistic trap, but I understand your point. Yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, look, and I've written about this a good deal because it's you know, it's of some interest to me and it's fascinating, and I think it's connected to mid-century fascism, even to eugenics, and you know, Hitler was a great admirer of American eugenics programs, and you have to remember that when the first overpopulation warnings were coming out, and Paul Ehrlich and all those first generation guys were saying, you know, there's too many people. It's the planet is going to use 20 years. It's going to be, you know, catastrophic and so forth. It triggered a whole set of a kind of ideological sea changes in the face of it, or
a lot of corporate money too, John.
Yeah, a ton of the Rockefeller Foundation and you know, the Club of Rome. This goes back to the 1980s, 1960s, really. But you know, there was the famous Pogo cartoon. We have met the enemy, and it is us. This became the perspective on which the kind of green left movement attached itself, that people were the problem. People were a blight on the planet, and it would be much better off if we had fewer people. And people, you know, Jane Goodall.
I was gonna say Jane Goodall and Sir David Attenborough. I am so disappointed in them.
Yeah, and they want to reduce the population by 90%. They never mean themselves, of course, but you know, when Jane Goodall says, I'll be the first one to jump into the fire pit, then I might start to listen. But all of these people, Jane Goodall, whose real name is Dame Lady something, I mean, she comes from aristocracy. Ursula von der Leyen comes from, you know, a family of slave traders. They all have links to the eugenics movement, you know, as does Bill Gates, and his father was very big in it. There is this revanchist eugenics thing lurking, percolating under the surface of much of the climate discourse today. So I maintain, but in any event, it doesn't matter really how much credence one gives to it. The issue is that the climate stroke green, you know, emergency is an emerging market, and Western capital has invested in it enormously, and the World Economic Forum has been a champion of it, and so forth. I don't personally believe any of these people are worried about global warming, because, you know, they still keep saving money for their kids' college programs, and they buy beachfront property, and nobody's acting as if there's any urgency to any of this. But that whole, you know, the Greta thing and all of this stuff, the problem is it's an emerging market, but it also obscures the real issues of pollution and energy demand and overconsumption and all of these things. And yet nobody ever mentions militarism in these discussions, by the way, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or Nord Stream.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest consumer of petroleum in the world is the U.S. military. Right. So, you know, so I'm just throwing all this shit out there.
Yeah, I don't aspire to the Nostradamus aspect of these things. You know, I mean, Isaac Newton predicted the end of the world in 2060. He may be right. It's a pretty damn good prediction for the guy that created the calculus, along with Leibniz, of course. But the thing I want to point out is that these things, the the remedies that are being suggested are using the same scientific method that has caused the problem. And if it's the methodology, it's not. It's like solar panels. Here's another solution. They use all kinds of toxic materials in making solar panels, and then they're not biodegradable when you can't use them anymore. It's like the scientific method deep down, and people got on me. I used to write about this in Science is Culture, and people would just go crazy, hostile toward me, because it is nihilistic, because that's the only method that's left. All the minority methods that of living in the world, like Native Americans, for example, have either been wiped out, or they've got such a they're kind of sentimentalized within the context of the greater Western enlightened mind. And so unless the scientific method is radically examined as a tool for development or a tool for living on the planet, it's over, gone, bye.
Okay.
I'd like to selfishly interject the 6 or 7 points that have come across my mind in the last 10 minutes. So the last commentator here talked about Daniel Lazar. He was our previous guest. And that did remind me that even though Daniel Lazar is a Trotskyite, he was on the right side of Syria. And one of his articles on the Syria, the Western propaganda offensive against Syria, was very illuminating and kind of opened my eyes to what was really going on in Syria, right when they were having all those color revolutions. What was that called? The Arab Spring. The Arab
Spring, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So not all Trotskyites get everything wrong all the time.
That's a good point, actually.
the WSWS Workers World. They said Zizek was too stupid for them.
Did you hear Zizek's latest pronouncements?
Yeah, let's.
His anti-Russian rant?
I have, and I'm saying the WSWS, the World Socialist website, said he's nuts. Even they said he's nuts.
Yeah. I mean, that was stunning.
Yeah,
it was like bomb the Russians. You can't.
NATO cheerleader, but enough. Billy Bob, we should let.
Well, yeah, I had a few selfish things I was going to put out there. So 6 years ago, I posted this on Facebook. It was a tweet from Donald Trump, and it basically said, this is when Putin won the election 6 years ago. Trump said it was November 21st, 2018. I called President Putin of Russia to congratulate him on his election victory. In the past, Obama called him also. The fake news media is crazed because they wanted me to excoriate him. They are wrong. Getting along with Russia and others is a good thing, not a bad thing. Imagine a U.S. president saying that. No wonder he's a pariah.
Won't do it today, though.
So, and then, John, you put out that documentary on your Facebook about the climate change documentary. I've only been able to watch the first minute, and it had that epic Greta Thunberg rant. That just brought a smile to my face when I heard her, really getting angry at the climate people.
How dare you?
Let's see. Okay, we also had a clip of Jared Kushner and his response to the ongoing genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza. But we don't have to really go there yet. I know Ben had another clip lined up too, but whichever one we want to go to. And then we were going to talk about Rock Hill, but we can do that a little bit later. But I've written his name down because Carlo reminded me to ask you about that, John. But you want to go with one of the clips, Ben?
I'm happy either way. Maybe since you brought it up, we should go with Jared Kushner because it fits in with everything.
Okay.
You want to bring it on?
Okay. Yeah.
Once Gazans leave Gaza, Netanyahu's never going to let them back in.
Maybe, but I'm not sure there's much left in Gaza at this point. So my sense is I would say, how do we deal with the terror threat that is there so that it cannot be a threat to Israel or to Egypt, right? I think that both sides are spending a fortune on military. I think neither side really wants to have, a terrorist organization enclaved right between them. And Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to, if people would focus on kind of building up It's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there, but I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out and then clean it up.
From Judge Knapp, I hope he doesn't mind that we use the clip. Yeah.
In a
little bit of an unfortunate situation.
It's best just to move the people out. Just move them out, John.
1,000 dead children. It's a little bit unfortunate.
Yeah, all those
into the desert.
Really, beachfront property. Yeah, waterfront property. I saw that. I was just my jaw dropped. I thought, how tone deaf can you possibly get? He just has no fucking clue at all. But this is, I mean, since the last time I was on here, we've done Aesthetic Resistance has done a couple of podcasts, and we've talked about this. Israel is going to keep going as long as they can, and the goal is to exterminate every single Palestinian. And I run into people on social media who defend this, and there are sane voices out there, and you try to explain the history to people, and it doesn't matter because they have no clue and they don't want to know. But what it speaks to, it seems to me, is that everybody, all of us, on some level, underestimated the racism, the Islamophobic racism of Western society. And that's really what's behind most of this. They're just a bunch of dirty Arabs, Nobody really cares.
In Europe, that is absolutely, many European capitals, that's the case. Not with the people, but with the leadership. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ian, you had something on your mind earlier.
Well, I'm thinking of those that genre of movies that was very popular in the 1990s and early 2000s. Those American college movies like American Pie, where you have that douchey, where you have the girl that the main character's in love with, and you have her boyfriend who's always a guy like Jared Kushner. You see him, and that's always the bad guy in movies. You see him, you want to punch him in the face.
That is good.
That's good.
That's why I know what Spring Break is, thanks to those movies.
As I was watching that clip, I pictured Jared Kushner in a straitjacket, and the interviewer was actually a criminal psychiatrist. Trying to get to the heart of what created this atrocious mass murderer. So
the point takeaway is it seems obvious.
He has to wear the yuppie, shorts and formal shoes. That's his attire.
Popped collar on his what are those?
Yeah.
But I agree with John. That's totally the plan, and they're going to continue to do it as long as they can get away with it. And so the question is, are they going to be able to get away with it? Is Hezbollah, is Iran going to allow the total ethnic cleansing of Gaza? Are the Houthis going to allow that? The resistance elements in Iraq. That's the question, I guess.
Yeah, it is, and it's certainly. I mean, in 100 years, one of the questions that historians will have, I think, is why did the rest of the Arab world, Arab leadership, do nothing?
Yeah,
I mean,
especially
literally nothing. And many of them, Jordan and Egypt, have helped Israel and aided Israel, and the Saudis. This is the judgment of history will be as much against the Arab ruling class as it is against Israel, frankly, because they've done nothing.
I think so too, Christy.
Yeah.
I mean, does anybody doubt that they're going to do the Rafah offensive? It doesn't matter what Biden says or warns. I think they're going to go in. If Netanyahu is still in charge, he's going to go in. And that will be just much more serious internationally than anything else, just to their reputation, to their bloodthirstiness, just obvious for everybody. It's going to be horrible.
Well, the Arab states have unfortunately never been known for unity.
Nah, not for a couple hundred years.
But longer than that, even like with Syria was getting torn up for years, and no one. I mean, they just when did they let Assad back into the Arab League? It was like 2 years ago, was not?
Yeah, on the China initiative. Yeah.
Yes, so it's just, and the other elephant in the room is that Palestinians have unfortunately never been a terribly popular ethnic group, even among Arabs. So it's just these Arab regimes, these states. It's like, well, I don't really care, to be honest.
I mean,
I don't care.
So I would differentiate the governments from the populations, and the governments are a result of World War One, the dividing up of the U.S., the dividing up of the Middle East, the Western powers, dictating who's going to govern who. So the House of Saud got Saudi Arabia, the Hashemite dynasty got Jordan. And these are people that the West has propped up and kept in power. And so they're all, for lack of a better term, puppets. They're Western puppets, and they're the ones that sell out the interests of their people and their nation and their region to the interests of Western capital. So that's why they're not targeted for regime change. The people that don't do that get targeted, like Syria, like Iran, like Hezbollah. So that's the dividing.
This is exactly right, I think. Exactly right. And people, I think, forget about this.
Show you something, just quickly.
Wait, he was saying I was right. Don't stop.
Yes, you're right. But this, apparently, this tag, this graffiti says, "Sorry, Palestine, we too are occupied," found in Cairo.
Yeah.
I thought this was topical.
If you want to go to the last Aesthetic Resistance podcast and scroll down in somewhere on there where we provide links. There's links to an early 60 Minutes interview with Leila Khaled after the hijacking and the whole controversy with her and the PLO. And it's an interview that it would be impossible today. I mean, impossible. It's actually rather flattering to her, and the language employed is in many ways perfectly reasonable. And then there's a later piece when she's much older interview that's also something that would be impossible to see today. So it's just interesting. But in terms of what Billy Bob said here, this is exactly right. The U.S. is still angry at Iran because of the revolution they didn't see coming, and they kicked out the Shah, and the U.S. was quite happy with the Shah. They had put him in 52, of course, with Mossadegh, and got rid of him. This is important to remember. The U.S. doesn't tolerate disobedience. They discipline the disobedient. And on the Arab street, in quotation marks, Palestinians are hugely popular, but the Arab street has no power. These are all repressive governments across the board, and as you said, they are the legacy of colonialism, of the British and French rule in that region. So, I mean, you could trace all of it back, but
Sykes-Picot.
Can I just share a little bit of breaking news and then give you some hope? The breaking news is there was apparently just an hour and a half ago a big vote at the UN where the US proposed their ceasefire proposal. It was voted down by Russia, China, and Algeria. What you won't read is that Algeria represented the entire Arab bloc. Russia and China, I read this from Dmitry Polyansky, the vice deputy permanent representative to the UN of Russia, who said, no, they didn't call for a ceasefire. It was wishy-washy talk that maybe in principle we should agree on something, and they didn't say there should be a ceasefire without hostages or anything. And Russia and China voted it down because it didn't call for an immediate ceasefire. But what I'd like to say is I think in every region in the world, and it's coming faster than I anticipated, justice is coming. There's two pieces of news from Russia which I've been waiting for a quarter of a century. One, they went to the UN and asked that NATO be held responsible for the bombing of Yugoslavia, which is, I think, huge. By the way, there was a big Serb delegation in Moscow. Lavrov sat down and watched a friendly For you, football. For us, soccer. For the other way around, match, you know, Serbia, Russia, and they talked about all sorts of things. And the second one is Germany for the siege of Leningrad to be recognized as genocide. Things I've been waiting for. And people still think that after this, The Hague will be where, you know, that not Imran, the other Khan, the asshole Khan, is going to be the one who decides things. No, ladies and gentlemen, after this, the world is a new place. And I think that's the same goes for, you know, the Yemeni armed forces, better known as the Houthis, who have hypersonic rockets. That has to come from Iran. So while Iran doesn't want an all-out war in the region, Hezbollah wouldn't stand without Iran. Even the Gaza resistance wouldn't stand without Iran. And, you know, the Yemenis, they put themselves in, hey, there's a big crosshair. Come on, kill me. Kill me if you can.
Nobody wants a piece. Nobody wants a piece of Yemen.
Yeah, I mean, maybe some compradors, maybe Al-Sisi is afraid and he's taking IMF and European money, but not the Houthis. Not the Houthis. And their blockade has just been extended to the ships that go around the Cape of Good Hope. And they signed an agreement with Russia and China saying, your ships are safe, mate. Go ahead. You're our friends.
Well, you know, the thing is, because you're right, and I mean, the Houthis are remarkable, and what they've achieved is remarkable, and it's cost Israel and the U.S.
and the UK and Germany, a
great deal of money, and all of this is right, but it's the
too
whole
slow.
ceasefire question is. People are slowly starting to think, okay, this Miko Peled, who I always mention, has been so great about this, but Norman Finkelstein has, other people are saying this, we're not talking about a ceasefire anymore. We're talking about end the occupation, stop the occupation. And as Max Perry said the other day, let's stop talking about the two-state solution. South Africa didn't have a two-state solution. No, we have one state. We have a democracy and everybody votes. And you know, this whole idea of a racially pure country is you know, past its sell-by date.
Yeah, that's the approach that I don't hear enough. I mean, because that's the truth. The problem is Zionism. Yep. And the solution is to end Zionism. And one country. Ali Abu Nima has been pushing that for decades, and he convinced me that that's the approach. I mean, you know, over 10 years ago.
Black and white photos you can find of Palestine before 1947-48, and you can see Jewish, Muslim, Christians just living together, exactly like in Syria today.
By the way, those early pictures of Palestine pre-48. It looks like a very lovely country.
Yes,
I mean, remarkably kind of peaceful and beautiful and idyllic. It's really interesting. Look, there are a number of documentaries out, and I encourage people to search them out. The history of Zionism, the pre-48 terrorist acts by Irgun and the Stern Gang. Menachem Begin was one of the leaders.
I had my key.
You know, he was wanted as a terrorist by the UK and so forth. Thousands of Arabs were murdered. The King David Hotel killed 91 civilians bombing the King David Hotel. That was Irgun. This stuff has just been erased. It's down the memory hole. But the Zionist project came in with murderous intent from day one. They started killing Arabs, and everything else is a fantasy and is propaganda. And Miko Peled, I mean, he has his own webpage, and his story is remarkable. He was the son of a very high-ranking, famous Israeli IDF general. He comes from Zionist aristocracy, in a sense. You know, his father was friends with Moshe Dayan and all these famous people. And he served in the military, and he had an awakening, a radicalization. And you should listen to him. He's a beautiful speaker. And now he is one of the most outspoken proponents. He said, there is no good Zionism. Just end Zionism. It's bad. These people have suffered for 75 years. Enough. It has to end now.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. That's the story. And we're, you know, this is what's so interesting about this the ongoing genocide is that, and we've all said this already, but it is the first one filmed on smartphones. And every single day you can go to X or social media somewhere and see pictures of IDF soldiers killing civilians. Every single day there's some new clip of snipers killing somebody or soldiers tormenting or brutalizing civilians, of the settlers blocking aid getting into starving people. It's extraordinary that anyone defends this. It is just extraordinary to me.
Anti-Zionist Jews are definitely a minority, but they're tremendous, and they need to be platformed more because they're an antidote to anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Right. Like
Torah Judaism is a very good.
Jews are what needs to be promoted, because those right-wing nut jobs that want to blame everything on Jews, Zionism facilitates those people. Makes them. It causes anti-Semitism. Carlo, go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to put out a praise for the Orthodox rabbi. Rabbi Yosef David Weiss, or Weiss. He goes around to these talk shows, and he's an old man like me, and he has a folder with Arabs and Jews that getting along perfectly, and before Zionism. And he says all they have to do is kick the Zionists out of that Palestine, and things could go back to normal.
Yeah.
They lived in harmony then.
Yeah,
open question to John and Carlo, because it looks like in this new multipolar world, we're going to unearth some history that people don't want unearthed. People don't want to know about 2014, the the Odessa massacre at the Union House, the people of Donbass suffering for 9 years, and it's going to be known. Do you think the same is possible for this region, for the Nakba, the original Nakba, the keys and everything, right to return for everybody? Do you think it will be well-known history once this?
Yeah, I do. I don't think Israel can survive.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I'm rather hopeful on this.
Because the United States is crumbling itself. The United States is not the world economic power anymore. It's China. And you can see with the whole debacle in Ukraine and the U.S. trying to leverage, NATO against Russia, it has failed miserably, and it will fail far worse against China. The U.S. is terrified of a war with Iran. It can't fight a war with Iran. Yeah. It can't win that war. The U.S. doesn't have enough sailors to man their ships that don't work anyway.
The Brits can come in. They superglued their submarines,
Yeah, yeah. Nothing has gone right for the British military or Navy. Nothing has
ridiculous.
gone right. I want to footnote one other thing, also available. I linked it on our last podcast. But Yarden Katz, YAR. Yarden Katz, I think he teaches at the Harvard Medical School, actually. Anyway, he has an extraordinary article, op-ed piece at Mondoweiss. Is that
Mondoweiss? Yeah. Whatever the pronunciation.
And he has a piece, a slightly earlier piece from a couple of years ago at Monthly Review about Zionism, and they're very worth reading. Just Google Yarden Katz.
Every time you're on, John, you give me a lot of work after the show to include all these links in our video, but I will do that. So I'm going to include the Leila Khaled, the 60 Minutes. I'm going to include Miko Peled's homepage, and then I can include this Mondoweiss article.
The Yarden Katz Mondoweiss is really quite brilliant. Everyone I've given it to has been impressed with it, because he's a Jew. I think he may be an Israeli citizen even. Very brilliant guy, and everyone I've given it to has said, "Yeah, this is first rate." Those are the most important voices, I think, at this point.
Ian, did you want to? We've been censoring you for a while. We've been talking over.
I just saw a bit of breaking news pop up on my feed. Actually, The new National Defense Authorization Act just passed the Senate and the House. It's not the $60 billion for Ukraine,
It's the 1 trillion something, right?
Right. But it does. I just confirmed it. It does include some drip feed for Ukraine in there and some funding for the Indo-Pacific. There's someone, so there is some unhappiness because the most contentious issue in it is the Homeland Security portion, which is the border dispute. So the MAGA Republicans are pretty unhappy about it. Majority Green has already called for Johnson to be ousted, which would be funny if that happened because that'll be the third House Speaker we've had. I mean, so as of right now, yes, it looks like there's going to be a drip feed even without that.
So a lot of that. I forget Guam was going to get like $400 million to update the Guam base because it's a pivot to China. It's the pivot to China. It's emblematic of that Tiananmen Square memorial going up in Brussels. Like it's.
I love that. Like just a week ago, the Pentagon found like 200 million in unexpected savings or something like that. So they sent this little tranche from the drawdown. And there was this article, one of the realists, National Interest or Foreign Policy, said, it will last maybe a week, maybe two. So maybe this is a larger tranche. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts, but I wanted to make a broader point about this. And there's this guy who I don't know who he is, Alex Vershinin. It sounds like a Russian Jewish name, but he penned this massive article, The Attritional Art of War, Lessons from the Russian War in Ukraine, in RUSI. That's the Royal United, the British kind of military think tank guys, RUSI. And he said, basically, I'm going to paraphrase, but basically you have to be massive, scalable, massive industry is what wins wars, and that's what's completely missing from the United States and Europe. It's completely financialized. It's hollowed out. It's been deindustrialized, both the US and Europe. So what you have is little private companies who are used to, we get a grant, but we can, the 155 millimeter ammunition went up from about $500 to $3,000, and we're only going to make it as you need it on the spot. We're not going to. Russia, China, and Iran, they're three, I guess some people would call them. North Korea, the same. They have a national defense industry. The price stayed the same. And what they had was this one little belt producing something, but they never abandoned the 4 other belts, even during the horrible days of the 1990s when the Soviet Union crumbled. It was always, they remember in history, we can get invaded quickly, so we can just upscale it. And so I read something like, Shoigu inspected some military assembly, and some components of something went up 22-fold since the start of the war. 22-fold. That was in the recent TASS. Okay, that's what they're doing. You can't do this with little private companies engaging with each other in shady deals in a casino world where there's stocks, there's exports, there's reputation to be. No, that's not what these 3 countries do, and that's why they just don't have a chance. I mean, I read that the US, after 3 failed attempts, they finally successfully launched the first hypersonic missile. Now, from there to get it into the field, as in not just successfully tested but deployed, that's years.
Yeah.
Exactly the same for NATO to respond to, NATO or the US to respond to the kind of shell production that Russia has, which this big CNN article said is about 3 million a year. They found themselves in this impossible situation. Gives me quite a lot of hope.
Well, I think what's badly misunderstood about this war is that it is the most dynamic war in human history. A lot of people say, it's like World War I, it's attritional warfare. Well, I mean, it's static warfare, it's just trench, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it's not at all static. It's actually
brand new weapons. It's different than when it started.
Even the fact that there's little in the way of territorial gain or loss on either side is a sign of how dynamic it is. Like this morning, I was reading about the Battle of Manzikert, which was in the 11th century with the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantines, and the Turks, Seljuk Empire. And so basically the Byzantines lost their army at this battle in 1071. And this caused basically a collapse The empire lost a huge amount of territory. The Turks just flooded into, they brought in, not just the army, but settlers. So they just colonized a large portion of Asia Minor that used to be imperial territory. And just this one battle cost a huge loss of territory. That's because in the old days, when armies were still moving around on horse carts, you couldn't just print money back then. So if you lost a battle, that was it was a large territorial loss. But now, when you lose an army, you can just bring in a new army the next day. Like you have something like Bakhmut or Avdiivka, you lose one town. It doesn't matter. You immediately bring all these logistics. Armies are moving faster, mobilizing faster than ever before in human history. So that's why there's not large territorial gains on either side. And that's a result of an industrialized country being able to mobilize and move resources faster than ever before. So it's just a rock in a hard place.
The thought that was coming to my mind was, how is the West going to convince Westerners to sacrifice and fight and die in a war against Russia and China? Like, what needs to happen for the U.S. or for the West to convince, the citizenry that it's time to go fight and die? And like, I can't even imagine what that would take, because the minute people in the U.S. are asked to sacrifice, they're not going to be happy. And I assume the same is true in Europe.
Did you read exactly the same? Yeah. There was this, I think it was a Tuesday cheat sheet. It was early in the week. Politico had this article. Now, in the great time of need, NATO soldiers don't want to fight. And it was about each country, not just striving to recruit, striving to retain. Because people are quitting in droves when they see this kind of hawkish rhetoric. Let's go against Russia. Even France cannot retain its current army. That's how bad it is. Yeah.
I just want to, apropos of that, and I think this is an important point you make there. Never, and other people have said this obviously because it's so obvious. The leadership in Europe is stunningly unpopular. Number one. The vast majority of prime ministers, presidents, parties in power in the EU are incredibly unpopular right now. But we've never had such, since modern Europe existed in its current form. I don't think there have ever been such idiotic people in charge of things. I mean,
sorry.
What do you mean?
Yeah, there you go.
I put it on screen saying, if I die, this is what hell looks like.
Yeah.
Claire Daly calls van der Leyen Frau genocide. Yeah. I mean, but in England, they've had it's Rishi Sunak and Starmer is coming in. I mean,
before that, Liz Truss, who was outperformed by Alexis.
And that horrible mannish woman that, what was her name? Anyway, doesn't matter.
May.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Theresa May. I always forget her.
They're all just idiotic. And then you have Macron, who his former boy toy is now been appointed, and his boyfriend. None of these people are qualified for their jobs. None of them have any real world experience. They are not particularly educated or well informed about anything. They are the product of, Macron was apparently born in a test tube in the basement of Goldman Sachs somewhere. I don't know, but they're, nobody trusts them. Nobody likes them. They're incredibly unpopular. This is
under
not
20%.
sustainable.
Macron
go ahead.
Macron and his foreign minister, the appointed gay guy, Sejourne or something like that, they're like 22% according to the latest, like Le Monde poll. Yeah, that's a real European democratic leader. 22% approval, not 87 like that dictator Putin.
Our program is called Exposing Imperial Decline, and like that's what we're talking about right now. I mean, there's so many problems and obstacles facing the Western imperialism, and they're not smart enough to deal with them, and so it's inevitable.
No, they're not.
It's not sustainable.
It's the hedonistic age of Rome. Yeah,
I have to go.
Well, I was trying to. You can leave, John. I was trying to get to one last thing. I mentioned Rockville earlier.
Quick.
Okay, So that's a lot of pressure. Essentially, I value Rockhill's work tremendously.
We're talking Gabriel Rockhill here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
okay.
his thesis kind of is, about the industry of theory and how the French school of critical theory and the German school of critical theory were co-opted by Western imperialism, like CIA, in order to, create a Western left that's compatible with imperialist interests. And so that's kind of Rockhill's approach to things. That it's very persuasive to me. Now, Carlo is a little bit defensive about that. He likes a lot of the thinkers in the French school and in the German school, and he said that
Frankfurt
you kind
school.
of agree with
I
the
do
Frankfurt
agree with
school.
Carlo.
That
Look,
you like the. So I want to get your thoughts on Rockhill's work and what do you think about the two schools of critical theory?
Here's the problem with Rockhill.
Okay.
Who went to a very expensive school and was very overeducated at whatever expensive school he went to. I don't know that he has ever read the Frankfurt School, to be honest with you. And he's absolutely entirely wrong, entirely 100. And I would be happy to sit down and debate him anytime he wants on the topic of Adorno and Horkheimer. Anytime the motherfucker wants, I will sit down and debate him. Number one, and he wrote a thing about abstract expressionism that was also wrong. You can go to my blog and look up, I think the title was Revisiting the New York School. I wrote a whole 5,000 word essay on abstract expressionism. A lot of the left loves, because they're not particularly knowledgeable in this area, think, oh, the CIA co-opted and invented abstract art, especially the Abex painters and Pollock and Rothko and et cetera, de Kooning, Klein. And it's all just junk that the CIA invented. No, this is not what happened. The CIA came very late. All those guys had been working for a long time. What's his name? Clement Greenberg was already writing about them before the CIA ever heard about them. They went in and said, we're going to try to promote this stuff as a sign of American freedom against, Soviet socialist realism, which was terrible, admittedly.
Hey.
It's the only thing I really hold against the USSR is that they kicked out Wilhelm Reich and they destroyed the early 1920s artists that were brilliant in the USSR right after the revolution. Anyway, those painters, all of those Abex painters, Klein and Rothko and Pollock and de Kooning and Gottlieb and all of them were immigrants. They were poor from working class backgrounds. Clifford Still wasn't an immigrant, but he came from a working class background. None of them went to elite schools, art schools. They all, de Kooning worked in department store windows, putting up, displays. They went to socialist meetings. They were all Marxists. They were all working class. They all suffered depression and were alcoholics, but never mind.
Because they created useless kitsch.
They also gave a lot of their money to the civil rights movement. Anonymously and without making a big display. They gave most of their money in the early years to the civil rights movement. Rothko worked, what's his name? Barnett Newman worked as a labor organizer. Rothko did too. They attended socialist meetings. And none of them, and they're depicted by people like Rockhill as somehow stooges of the CIA and the US State Department. And it's kind of a disgraceful position to hold. You can read my piece on it, and I draw on a number of very reliable sources. The second thing is, if one wants to attack post-structuralism in, Derrida and Barth, in some ways, the American reception to that is problematic, and that's pretty low-hanging fruit, frankly. Mm-hmm. But some of it's very good. I mean, there's parts of Baudrillard and parts of Barthes and stuff that is very valuable. Part of Rockhill's shtick is a kind of weird, vulgar Marxism. It's like anti-intellectualism masked as something else. I don't know, and Rockhill has said good things. I'm not suggesting he's a psyop or something. He's not Zizek. And he collaborated with Domenico Losardo, who I admire a good deal. So he's not, but he's very wrong about this particular thing. And I think he's wrong when he sources and talks about psychoanalysis as well. And I'll just very quickly, you have to remember that psychoanalysis, before it traveled the ocean to America, that early Vienna circle were all radicals and Marxists and socialists, and they depoliticized intentionally because they were escaping fascism, and they were all Jews. And so they, and Adorno and them wanted to behave themselves because they'd already fled one fascist country. Their close associate Benjamin committed suicide to escape the Nazis. They were a little bit afraid. And when Adorno went back to Germany after the war, he was horrified by the rehabilitation of all the Nazis, and that they were back in the academy, and that Hannah Arendt was helping rehabilitate Heidegger's reputation, et cetera, et cetera. So all of this stuff is left out of the Rockhill critique.
Yeah.
John, we're not going to hold you for long because you have to go, but I would love to see that if you sat down, and that debate actually happened. I would love to see it.
And just on a personal note, I worked near DuPont Circle, and on my lunch breaks, I would walk up to the Phillips Gallery and sit in the Rothko room. And anybody that slights Rothko's work is not my friend. I also want to say, point out that what I admire specifically about the Frankfurt School, the books I most admire are Adorno and Horkheimer's Dialect of Enlightenment and Horkheimer's Eclipse of Reason. They're monumental works.
Absolutely.
Monumental works.
Absolutely.
For understanding the Western malaise. My God.
Adorno is one of the most important thinkers of the 20th century. Aesthetic theory, that he never really finished his last book, but he'd been working on it for a long time, is the best book on aesthetics from the 20th century. Dialectic of Enlightenment, of course, is part of the canon. It's one of the great books written mostly in Los Angeles when they were in exile. Robert Hulot Kenter, one of Adorno's translators, has a book of essays on Adorno. I can't remember the title. Remembrance of Things, something like. Anyway, it's not the Proust, but anyway, but it's his only book, and he has the introductory essay, I believe, is called "Why Adorno." Anyway, it's a really excellent essay. I would highly recommend, and you can go to my blog because I've written about Adorno for 10 years. And honestly, I'm very proud of revisiting the New York School, my essay on abstract expressionism. It's on my blog. It's easy to Google. But I have to
fine,
and
go ahead.
Response.
Thanks, John.
Okay.
Thank you.
Adios.
But go ahead, plug the blog, please, John.
Yeah. Okay, guys. How do I get out of here?
Oh, I thought he was going to say dub.
I know. I was trying to get one more question in, but that's all right.
I just wanted to clean up a couple of things. I know Ed Luttwak, and we used to kibitz. He ended up he would try to play along. He was a usual the customary Washington ass kisser, and he used to play along with that. But every once in a while, he would say something outrageous. It would be on the outs, and it would bother the hell out of him. And he ended up he couldn't publish really consistently in the Washington Post, so he started publishing in the Washington Times, which is the minority Mooney newspaper here. And in a way, he's an interesting guy because he knows a lot about Eastern Europe. But on the same topic, he's a game player essentially. The other thing I want to mention, we're talking about eugenics. William Shockley, the inventor of the transistor, was a eugenicist, and the first people he wanted to kill were African Americans. So every time I see a rap singer up on a microphone, I think, you're using you're using an instrument that the creator of which wanted to kill you. And it's like, it's a funny feeling I get from that kind of dichotomy, because they're supposed to be so radical, but I bet I could go, other than low key, I could probably go put that microphone under 1,000 rappers and they wouldn't know who William Shockley was. So anyway,
I'm sure that's true.
There was a couple of other.
I was gonna ask John.
I didn't know you met Edward Luttwak. That's very interesting. Go ahead.
Well, I live in Washington, so we're all together in this Satan's anus. It's very humid in here.
I was gonna ask John to respond to the question about. It seems like Rock Hill's critique isn't that these schools do a very strong and rigorous critique of capital and of the West. Like that's not his argument. His argument is that what they suggest in response, what they suggest as a solution, they don't have any solutions, and they don't promote socialism as the solution. And that's kind of Rock Hill's critique. And I was wondering if I wanted to get John to respond to that question too, but we ran out of time. We were talking about so many other things.
That was a good discussion.
Yeah, it was.
Well, we have to get him on with Rock Hill.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a John Rock Hill debate, I would love to watch that.
No, yeah, I'm curious how that would go, because I'm not well read. I haven't, done a deep dive of years of my life into critical theory of either school. And Carlo definitely has, and John has, and I think Rock Hill has, despite you guys saying he hasn't.
My whole, I would be brief about this, but my whole thing is, look, you got to let people write what they're going to write and think what they're going to think. I mean, that's the first axiom. So Rock Hill saying, "Oh, you didn't do enough of this, you didn't do enough of that," first of all, I could take issue with that. I keep pointing out examples to people at Dialectic of Enlightenment and Eclipse of Reason, but nobody cares that that's there. They pan it. Oh, that's not really. Well, it is. I mean, they're talking about what Billy Bob's promoting. And another place where I find it is the phenomenologists. I mean, you could talk about Hegel, but you also have to talk about Husserl, Heidegger, and Gadamer. And with Husserl, he has a brilliant book breaking down exactly what I'm talking about, the scientific method. It's called The Crisis of the European Sciences and Transcendental Phenomenology. It's a brilliant book, and it just takes the Western scientific method apart, rips it apart.
All the kids out there,
these are radical perceptions.
Yep. Absolutely, feel free to read it. Everybody should be free to read anything. But I feel like Lenin, Stalin, and others, they insulated me, and I can laugh at books that I found subpar. So anyway, if we are on the final thoughts, I just wanted to end on something funny, if that's okay. You brought up Trump's tweet from 6 years ago, congratulating Vladimir Putin, and my prime minister sent a letter. So Mr. Guy Verhofstadt, a one-time Dutch prime minister, I think, already called him traitor, is what he is. It's fantastic. And I love the fact that Budanov, who is the foreign intelligence chief, like national security guy in Ukraine, not Budanov, that's the GUR, the guy who does terrorist attacks. This is Danilov. And apparently he's keeping a list of who's naughty and nice. There was an article saying he's keeping track of who congratulates the big bad, the Putin. And I thought that was hilarious. And this is the same guy who insulted the Chinese diplomat who's going around Europe and to his place, Li Hui. But apparently, I think Ian will know this, that the word Hui, hui, is something different in Russian. People say we should surrender territory just because some Hui or whatever his name is told us so. Immediately insulted him, which is, to me, shows exactly how desperate and unreal, like separated from reality, this leadership is. So I'm still with the team of Summer Collapse, but I'm happy to be proven wrong by Ian later.
And I just want to mention a word about Haiti, because I've been trying to get up to speed on Haiti, and I highly recommend Duran, that where Dan Cohen and Kim Ives especially appear on the program. Kim Ives is the senior editor of Haiti Liberté, and they
that was a Duran episode.
Yep,
Yeah,
recently.
Duran
I have to watch that.
And they discuss the current situation in Haiti, and
Okay.
I guess their general take on what's currently happening. Well, I don't want to go back into the history of how this came about, but they say that their take is that this guy barbecue
Cherizier.
Cherizier has Jimmy barbecue Cherizier has he has what he has done. He has coalesced the gangs who protect the neighborhoods and the gangs that were stealing and extorting from the neighborhoods, and he's creating a coalition, and they've had the Haitians they've had enough of being ruled by what's called the core group. They don't want to have CARICOM, that's the Caribbean alliance, to pick their new ruler, which the core group has essentially assigned that role. The reason that they've taken the airport and made it so planes can't land at the airport is they just don't want Henri to come back. Now, the interesting thing that Kim Ives has found out is that Henri is now imprisoned by the FBI, and the FBI has been questioning him about but I don't think they're really questioning. I think they're done with Henri, and they want to put somebody else, another puppet in, and they're still working on that. But
he's going to teach at Miami too.
Yeah.
He's going to share a flat with Zelensky and the
Guaido.
Guaido.
Henri is being held on a military base in Puerto Rico, and but anybody who is interested in Haiti, and I see that as the third blight, the third difficult policy for Biden after Ukraine and Gaza. I think that's really going to.
So I'll put that link to the Duran episode in my in the comment section of this video. Any other thoughts before we say goodbye, and we will meet again on Tuesday. I do have some guests lined up for Tuesday, so be sure to tune in same time next week Tuesday. Okay, guys, thank you very much. We'll see you then.